Diazien Hossencofft, born as Armando Chavez on March 5, 1965 in Houston, Texas, endured a troubled and unstable childhood. At just 6 years old, his parents divorced, and custody of Diazien and his siblings went to their father. Soon after, his father remarried and started a new family, leaving young Diazien feeling neglected and emotionally scarred. Heartbreakingly, he would never see his mother again. Growing up in a blended household with a stepmother and step-siblings, his young life was often marked by tension and conflict. As if his early years weren't difficult enough, his teenage years brought even more hardship. While playing high school football, Diazien suffered a severe head injury that was so critical he had to be airlifted to a hospital. Doctors kept him under close observation for 4 days, warning that the trauma could lead to lasting complications. After the accident, Diazien's personality shifted dramatically. He became withdrawn, emotionally detached, and began to exhibit manipulative tendencies, behaviors that, in hindsight, align with sociopathic traits. By 16, Diazien made the drastic decision to completely cut ties with his family and leave home. After graduating high school, he attended Notre Dame University in California, studying chemistry. By age 20, he entered his first serious relationship with a 23-year-old woman named Rosemary. Their romance progressed quickly. They fell in love, got married, and welcomed a child. But the cracks in their relationship became visible almost immediately after the wedding. One of the biggest sources of tension in their marriage was Diazien's compulsive lying. Although undeniably intelligent, he often exaggerated or outright fabricated details about his life. He would boast of achievements that were far from true, like claiming he was at the top of his class, when that wasn't remotely the case. As time went on, Rosemary began noticing increasingly disturbing behavior. One day, she came home to find Diazien sitting in the bathtub, withdrawing his own blood using needles. This bizarre act revealed a troubling obsession with blood, his own and others. He spent hours engaging in this unsettling practice. In a particularly chilling moment, he even suggested that Rosemary take out a life insurance policy, naming him as the sole beneficiary. This suggestion deeply unnerved her. The red flags kept piling up, and Rosemary eventually realized it was impossible to ignore them any longer. After 3 chaotic and alarming years, she made the difficult choice to leave. Taking their child with her, she walked away, determined to escape the increasingly erratic and frightening man she had once believed she could trust. In his mid-20s, Diazien earned a bachelor's degree in chemistry. His ultimate dream was to become a doctor, but his grades just weren't good enough to secure a spot in medical school. Still, Diazien wasn't the type to let rejection stop him. Instead, he turned to forgery. By faking his academic transcripts, he managed to get into the University of Utah's School of Medicine. However, once he was in the program, his strange and unsettling behavior quickly started raising eyebrows. One of his oddest habits? He would often ask his classmates if he could draw their blood. On top of that, he was caught multiple times stealing medical supplies, including needles. But it didn't end there. Diazien had a flair for creating over-the-top sob stories to gain sympathy, telling anyone who'd listen that his ex-wife, Rosemary, had abandoned him and that he'd tragically lost a child in a car accident. The biggest red flag, though, was his explosive temper. Anytime someone questioned his intelligence, Diazien would fly into uncontrollable fits of anger, making those around him feel uneasy. While in medical school, Diazien took a part-time job at a local hospital. It was there that he met Paula, a patient receiving treatment for depression. The two quickly hit it off, and their relationship turned romantic. Before long, Diazien was spending a lot of time at Paula's house, even cooking meals for her. At first, Paula appreciated his efforts, but one evening, something felt off. The vegetables he had prepared tasted sour and spoiled. When Paula pointed this out, Diazien dismissed her concerns and insisted she eat them. Not wanting to argue, Paula reluctantly took a few bites. What happened next was horrifying. Within hours, Paula became violently ill. She experienced unbearable burning sensations, uncontrollable diarrhea, and nonstop vomiting. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors made a chilling discovery. Her system contained dangerously high levels of arsenic. Paula was convinced Diazien had poisoned her and immediately reported him to the police. But instead of taking her claims seriously, authorities brushed her off. They suggested her symptoms could have been the result of a suicide attempt, pointing to her history of depression. With no hard evidence to support Paula's accusation, the case was dismissed. This left Paula without justice, while Diazien remained free to continue down a far darker road. By the 1990s, Diazien was expelled from medical school after authorities uncovered his forged transcripts. But instead of giving up on his dream of becoming a doctor, he doubled down. He reinvented himself entirely, complete with a new identity. He adopted the name Diazien Hossencofft, ensuring it was both distinctive and entirely his own. In 1992, during a trip to SeaWorld in San Diego, Diazien met Gurly, a 30-year-old woman from Malaysia who had deep ties to her close-knit family. Born in 1963, Gurly had lived a modest and traditional life up until that moment. Meeting Diazien changed everything. His charm worked fast, and even after Gurly returned to Malaysia, their connection only grew stronger. He showered her with love letters and heartfelt attention, eventually proposing to her. By early 1993, Gurly made the life-altering decision to leave her family and homeland behind, moving to the United States to start a new life with him. The couple settled in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where Gurly found a job as a bank teller. At first, their life together seemed perfect. Gurly felt like she was living a fairy tale, convinced she had found her soulmate. But the dream soon crumbled into a nightmare. Almost everything Diazien had told her was a lie. He claimed to be a highly educated thoracic surgeon with degrees from prestigious universities. In truth, he was nothing more than a skilled manipulator and con artist. And tragically, Gurly wasn't Diazien's only victim. In mid-1993, Diazien set his sights on Sunny Blake, a 72-year-old heiress battling advanced breast cancer. Lonely and clinging to hope, Sunny had posted a personal ad seeking companionship. Sensing an opportunity, Diazien swooped in, introducing himself as a revolutionary cancer treatment. Desperate for a cure, Sunny fell for his grandiose claims and began paying Diazien enormous sums of money for his so-called treatments. These treatments, however, were nothing more than sham vitamin B injections. But Diazien's deceit didn't stop there. He spun an even more outlandish tale, claiming he had discovered an anti-aging compound derived from his own blood. To sell the lie, he would draw Sunny's blood, mix it with his own, and then re-inject it into her body, insisting this absurd procedure would reverse the aging process. Once completely caught in his manipulative web, Sunny handed over $25,000 a month for these fake treatments. When the money wasn't enough, Diazien pushed his schemes even further. He fabricated a story about needing a home for his daughter and convinced Sunny to buy him a house, ultimately draining another $500,000 from her fortune. Tragically, the cost of his exploitation went beyond Sunny's finances. Trusting his promises, she abandoned legitimate cancer treatments for his fraudulent ones. As a result, her illness progressed unchecked, and she ultimately lost her life. By the time Sonny realized the full scope of Diazien's deception, it was far too late. His greed and lies had left devastation in their wake, cutting short a life that might have been saved with proper medical care. At this point, Diazien and Gurly's marriage had already weathered years of turmoil, but the cracks were becoming impossible to ignore. Diazien's secretive and elusive nature only added fuel to the fire. He kept Gurly completely in the dark about the fortune he'd swindled from unsuspecting victims, and refused to share any of it with her. His frequent trips to destinations like Hawaii, Canada, and the Caribbean weren't for work or even leisure, as he claimed. No, they were part of a much darker agenda. Diazien was targeting wealthy, vulnerable women, weaving clever lies to gain their trust and, ultimately, their money. On the other hand, Gurly was struggling with a heartbreak of her own. She desperately wanted to have a child, but despite her hopes and efforts, it simply wasn't happening. The void she felt was undeniable and overwhelming. Then, in 1995, their lives took an unsettling and unexpected turn. During a trip to Canada, Diazien met Naoko, a 28-year-old Japanese woman. To Diazien, Naoko wasn't just an attractive companion, she was his next opportunity. Obsessed with the idea of superior Japanese and German bloodlines, he became fixated on fathering a child with her. Staying true to his manipulative ways, Diazien spun an elaborate web of lies to earn Naoko's trust. Posing as a world-renowned surgeon, he painted himself as brilliant and admirable, quickly winning her over. Their relationship escalated at lightning speed, and before long, Naoko discovered she was pregnant. But even during her pregnancy, Diazien didn't ease up on his manipulation and control. After the baby was born, his lies took an even darker turn. He concocted an elaborate and cruel story claiming his family suffered from a rare genetic disorder that had been passed to the newborn. To make matters worse, Diazien insisted that only he could secure the specialized treatment the baby needed. Panicked and desperate to ensure her child's safety, Naoko reluctantly agreed to let him take the baby, believing she was doing the right thing. Diazien returned to the United States with the infant, but the lies didn't stop there. He told Gurly they had adopted the baby through an agency, and Gurly, unaware of the truth, believed him without question. Together they named the child Dimitri. What Gurly didn't know was the shocking reality. Dimitri wasn't adopted. He was Diazien's biological son, a child born out of his callous manipulation of Naoko. By 1996, Gurly and Diazien seemed to be living a relatively normal life, raising their young son Dimitri without any outward signs of trouble. But behind closed doors, their lives were anything but stable. Diazien became increasingly restless, eventually returning to his predatory behavior. During this time, he crossed paths with Kimberly Glasgow, a local hairdresser. To gain her trust, Diazien wove an elaborate web of lies, claiming to be a successful doctor and a leading cancer researcher. To add to his facade, he falsely claimed he was battling leukemia. Kimberly, like many others before her, fell for his charm and convincing story. It wasn't long before Diazien's dark side began to surface. His disturbing behavior became obvious when he insisted on examining Kimberly's 14-year-old daughter, an excuse to commit unspeakable abuse. But it didn't stop there. Pretending he needed blood for his fake leukemia treatment, Diazien even took blood samples from Kimberly's other children. Just as he had manipulated his first wife, Rosemary, Diazien controlled and dominated Kimberly, turning her into another pawn in his twisted game. Meanwhile, Gurly began to see through the carefully crafted persona Diazien had shown her. His lies, manipulation, and increasingly aggressive behavior were becoming impossible to ignore. As if things couldn't get worse, he escalated his abuse, turning to physical violence against her. Desperate to escape the nightmare her life had become, Gurly made a bold and dangerous choice. She decided to warn Kimberly about the man they both thought they knew. Kimberly was floored by Gurly's revelations, especially since she hadn't even known Diazien was married. When she confronted him and demanded answers, Diazien's mask shattered. Furious and defensive, the confrontation marked the beginning of the end for his relationship with Kimberly. But for Gurly, the fallout was far more terrifying. Enraged by her betrayal, Diazien came home drunk and unleashed his fury. He hurled insults like liar and fraud, but it didn't stop there. The argument turned physical as Diazien hit, shoved, and repeatedly kicked Gurly in a vicious attack. At one point, in a moment of terrifying violence, Diazien grabbed her by the neck and punched her so hard she nearly lost consciousness, all of it witnessed by their young son, Dimitri. Terrified and determined to protect her son, Gurly sought help from their 75-year-old neighbor Pedro. Without hesitation, Pedro acted. He called the police and bravely entered the house just long enough to create an opportunity for Gurly to escape. When the officers arrived, they found Gurly in a horrifying state. Her lips were split, her body covered in bruises, and her neck bore the clear signs of strangulation. A deep gash ran along the side of her leg. Diazien was swiftly arrested and charged with domestic violence, aggravated battery, and assault. But shockingly, before the case could go to trial, all the charges were inexplicably dropped. To this day, the reasons behind this baffling decision remain unclear. As a result, Diazien faced no consequences for his horrifying actions. The lack of accountability left behind a lingering sense of injustice that continues to haunt this unsettling chapter of their lives. By August 1998, Diazien was back to scheming, meticulously plotting his next move. His relationship with Kimberly was over, and with a restraining order keeping him away from Gurly, he shifted his attention elsewhere. This time, his focus landed on Julie, a 50-year-old recent divorcee trying to rebuild her life from enduring years of domestic abuse. Hoping for a fresh start, Julie posted a personal ad on an online dating site. Little did she know, this seemingly harmless act would lead her straight into Diazien's web of manipulation and lies. As always, Diazien spun an elaborate web of deceit. He presented himself as a brilliant surgeon who owned his own laboratory, painting the picture of a perfect match. To sell the illusion even further, he brought his young son Dimitri along on their dates. The presence of the boy added an air of trustworthiness and warmth that Diazien used to his advantage. Once he believed Julie had taken the bait, he introduced his latest scam, a so-called miraculous youth serum, which he claimed could stop and even reverse aging. Eager to believe in this too-good-to-be-true promise, Julie handed over thousands of dollars to participate in the bogus treatment. But as time went on, Julie began noticing unsettling details about Dimitri. Far from being a typical child, he was eerily quiet and answered questions in a robotic, rehearsed manner. It was as if the lively spirit of a young boy had been drained from him. Worse, Julie discovered needle marks on Dimitri's arms. When she questioned him about the marks, his vague and evasive answers only deepened her concerns. Gradually, other troubling signs emerged, both physical and behavioral, hinting at potential neglect or abuse. Alarmed and determined to act, Julie reported her suspicions to social services, triggering an investigation. However, the case was anything but straightforward. Dimitri, clearly terrified of his father, stayed silent, making it nearly impossible for authorities to gather solid evidence. Meanwhile, Gurly was focused on rebuilding her own life after the chaos Diazien had caused. She moved in with her neighbor Pedro, seeking not only safety, but also emotional support as she coped with the pain of being separated from her son. All the while, Diazien kept playing his relentless games, juggling his relationship with Julie while pursuing other women. Incredibly, he even managed to secretly get engaged to 2 other women at the same time. Amid this whirlwind of deceit, a new figure entered Diazien's twisted narrative: Linda Henning. Born on October 10, 1953 in Hollywood, Linda had once been a model but had since become deeply immersed in UFOs and conspiracy theories. In mid-1999, she met Diazien at a conference. True to form, Diazien crafted another outrageous backstory for her, this time claiming to be a 2,000-year-old alien. To most, this would sound utterly ridiculous, but to Linda, it was mesmerizing. Enchanted by his bizarre tale, Linda quickly fell under his spell. Their relationship escalated rapidly, and Diazien seized complete control over her life. She abandoned her fiancé, severed ties with her friends and family, and became entirely devoted to him. Around this time, Gurly decided it was time to cut all ties with Diazien for good. She filed for divorce and pursued custody of Dimitri, also demanding half of Diazien's assets. This infuriated him. His anger boiled over into a campaign of harassment, showing up at her workplace unannounced, vandalizing her car and more. Though he was arrested multiple times for his actions, he always seemed to evade serious consequences. Consumed by his growing hatred for Gurly, Diazien devised a chilling plan. He twisted Linda's already fragile beliefs, convincing her that Gurly was an evil, alien queen bent on destroying the world. Shockingly, Linda accepted his delusions as reality, not only believing his twisted story but also agreeing to help him in his sinister mission to take Gurly down. On the morning of September 10, 1999, Gurly Chu didn't show up for work, a red flag that immediately worried her co-workers. This was completely out of character for Gurly, who was known for being reliable and punctual. What made the situation even more unnerving was that Gurly had previously confided in her colleagues, telling them to contact the authorities if she ever went missing or if anything unusual happened. Taking her words seriously, they wasted no time in calling the police. When officers arrived at Gurly's apartment, the scene was unsettling. The front door was unlocked and the interior was strangely spotless, almost as if someone was trying to erase evidence. A strong scent of bleach lingered in the air, and the carpets looked freshly steam-cleaned. Suspicious of foul play, investigators used luminol to search for clues, and what they found was chilling: traces of blood scattered throughout the apartment. It became clear that something violent had occurred. Gurly's disappearance was no longer just a missing person case. It was now a criminal investigation. And all eyes turned to her estranged husband, Diazien Hossencofft, as the prime suspect. Detectives quickly went to Diazien's home, but he was nowhere to be found. The front door was wide open, and the house was almost empty, as though he had left in a hurry. During their investigation, police learned about Linda Henning, a woman closely associated with Diazien. Linda was brought in for questioning, but what she had to say was baffling. She made bizarre claims, including that Diazien was a 2,000-year-old alien on a mission to save Earth from evil extraterrestrials. If that wasn't strange enough, she also denied ever knowing Gurly. With no concrete evidence to hold her, police had no choice but to let her go. However, not long after, Linda vanished. Then came a gruesome discovery the following day. Along a New Mexico highway, a driver spotted a blood-soaked tarp discarded by the roadside. Inside, investigators found blood-stained clothing that was later confirmed to belong to Gurly Chu. Despite an extensive search of the surrounding area, no sign of Gurly's body was ever found. However, the amount of blood present was so significant that investigators concluded Gurly could not have survived. Her disappearance was officially declared a homicide. As the investigation continued, detectives tracked Diazien using his digital trail. His phone records revealed he had made a series of threatening calls to various individuals, leading police to his location in Charleston, South Carolina. When officers found him, he was living with a woman named Cheryl, his latest romantic partner, whom he had already begun planning to marry. The evening Diazien returned to Cheryl's home, police were waiting for him. He was arrested on the spot. During a search of the house, authorities uncovered a trove of suspicious items: Gurly's ID, her address book, 2 vials of blood, a steam cleaner, and a firearm. Meanwhile, Linda Henning's escape didn't last long. A search of her residence turned up a chilling piece of evidence: a samurai's sword, purchased just 1 day before Gurly disappeared. Even more damning, blood found in Linda's home matched the bloodstains on the tarp discovered along the highway, directly tying her to the crime. As investigators connected the dots, a horrifying narrative began to take shape. The evidence painted a grim picture of a sinister conspiracy and brutal violence, with both Diazien and Linda playing pivotal roles in Gurly's tragic fate. To this day, the case is remembered as one of the most disturbing and unsettling in New Mexico's history. 2 years after Gurly Chu disappeared without a trace, her body had still not been found. Despite this devastating reality, investigators were able to gather enough evidence to charge Diazien Hossencofft and Linda Henning with her murder. In 2002, Diazien struck a deal to avoid the death penalty by pleading guilty to first-degree murder. With his plea, there was no trial. He went directly to serving a life sentence behind bars. Linda, on the other hand, adamantly proclaimed her innocence and chose to stand trial. In a shocking move, her defense team called Diazien to testify as their star witness. Now remember, Diazien wasn't just a self-admitted murderer, he was also a notorious con artist. When he took the stand, his behavior was nothing short of bizarre. He claimed Linda had no involvement in the crime, and even alleged that he had planted her DNA in Gurly's apartment to frame her. Linda clung to this version of events, maintaining that she had been set up and casting Diazien as the manipulator behind the entire tragedy. But the evidence told a very different story. Investigators found Linda's blood inside Gurly's apartment, strands of her hair on a blood-soaked tarp abandoned along a highway, and the murder weapon, a samurai sword, inside Linda's home. The weight of this damning evidence led to Linda's conviction for first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to 73 years in prison. To this day, Gurly's body has never been recovered. Authorities suspect it was left in the vast expanse of the New Mexico desert, where wildlife likely destroyed any traces, making it nearly impossible to locate. Adding to the heartbreak of this tragedy is the fate of Gurly's son, Dimitri. With his mother murdered and his father imprisoned, Dimitri entered the foster care system. Over the years, he was shuffled between 13 different foster homes, enduring a childhood defined by instability and loss.
Before we conclude this video, please be aware that the video on the left may be disturbing. It is recommended for adult viewing only. On the right, you'll find a playlist of videos that have been highly appreciated by our viewers.